The shuttle doors opened with a hiss and stepped onto the metal floor of orbital station Vega 12. The air smelled strange, like copper and something sweet he could not name. He carried only one bag over his shoulder. Everything he owned fit inside it. Around him, alien soldiers moved through the docking bay. Some were tall and with hard skin like armor. Others had 4 arms and glowing marks on their bodies. A few looked like giant insects with clicking mouths. None of them looked at with friendly eyes. He was the first human to ever join the Galactic Alliance ground forces. Earth had only made contact with alien life 3 years ago. Now here he stood, a young man of 24 years, alone among creatures who had traveled between stars for thousands of years. A massive alien walked toward him. This one stood 8 feet tall, with shoulders as wide as a doorway. His eyes were small and black, set deep in a face that looked carved from stone. "You are the human," the alien said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir. Private reporting for duty." The alien looked him up and down slowly. His face showed nothing but could feel the judgment in that stare. He had felt it before many times. On Earth, people had called him too small, too quiet, too ordinary. Now aliens looked at him the same way. "I am Commander," the alien said. "You will address me as Commander. Follow me." Followed. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor while made heavy thuds with each step. They walked through wide hallways filled with soldiers. Everyone stopped to stare at the human. Some whispered to each other. A few laughed. They reached a large room where dozens of recruits stood in formation, pointed to a spot at the back. "Stand there. Do not speak unless spoken to." Took his place. The soldier next to him was one of the 4-armed aliens. This one was even bigger than, with muscles that looked like they could crush metal. Blue light glowed under his skin in patterns that moved when he breathed. The 4-armed alien looked down at and made a sound of disgust. "They send us a pet from the mud planet," he said loudly. "What next? Will they ask fish to fight in space?" Other soldiers laughed, said nothing. He kept his eyes forward and his face calm. The 4-armed alien leaned closer. "I am Sergeant. I train soldiers in heavy weapons. Real soldiers, not small things like you." He poked his chest with one thick finger. "Your bones would break if you tried to lift our weapons. Your soft skin would tear. You do not belong here, human." Met his eyes but still said nothing. This seemed to make angry. "Does it not speak? Perhaps humans are even more stupid than we thought." "I speak when I have something worth saying," replied quietly. The room went silent for a moment, then laughed, a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. "It has a voice, but voices mean nothing here, little human. Only strength matters, and you have none." Commander began speaking about training schedules and rules. Listened carefully while feeling the heat of glare on the side of his face. He had expected this. The reports about alien attitudes toward humans had been clear. They saw Earth as a death world, a planet so dangerous that any species surviving there must be either very lucky or very stupid. They did not understand that surviving such a world made humans strong in ways they could not see. After the meeting, a young officer led to his quarters. They walked far from the main barracks, down hallways that grew smaller and older. Finally, they stopped at a door barely wide enough for it to fit through. "This is yours," the officer said, then walked away without another word. Opened the door. Inside was a storage closet. Someone had removed the shelves and put in a thin sleeping mat. A small light hung from the ceiling. There was no window, no bathroom, no space to move. His bag barely fit beside the mat. He stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The room was cold and dark. Sat on the mat and opened his bag. He moved aside his few clothes and pulled out a small photograph in a worn frame. The picture showed an old woman with a kind face and silver hair, his grandmother. She had raised him after his parents died. She had taught him to be patient, to be strong, to never give up no matter how hard things became. She had died 2 years ago, just before Earth made contact with the aliens. She never knew that her grandson would travel to the stars. Held the photograph gently. "I made it," he whispered. "I am here. They do not want me. They think I am weak. They laugh at me and put me in a closet like trash." He paused, looking at her frozen smile. "But I will not quit. I will show them what humans can do. I will make you proud." He placed the photograph on the floor beside his mat, where he could see it when he woke. Then he lay down on the thin padding and stared at the dark ceiling. Tomorrow the real training would begin. Tomorrow he would face and the others again. They would try to break him. They would push him until he gave up and went home. But had survived things these aliens could not imagine. He had grown up on a world where the ground shook, where storms killed thousands, where every creature fought to stay alive. He had trained his body until it could do things that seemed impossible. He had learned to be patient when others expected him to fight, and to fight when others expected him to run. The aliens thought humans were weak because they were small and soft. They were wrong. Humans were the most dangerous thing their galaxy had ever seen. They just did not know it yet. Closed his eyes and slept. His breathing was slow and steady. His face was peaceful. Outside his closet, the station hummed with life. Soldiers trained and laughed and prepared for war. None of them thought about the small human sleeping in the forgotten corner of their world. None of them knew what was coming. The first week was a test of patience. Woke each morning at the same time, washed his face with cold water from the shared bathroom down the hall, and reported for training before anyone else. He stood alone in the dark training ground, stretching his muscles, preparing his body for whatever they would throw at him. The other soldiers noticed. They did not like it. "The human thinks it is special," said loudly on the third day. "Waking early like it has something to prove, but early mornings will not make you stronger, little creature. Nothing will." Said nothing. He finished his stretches and waited for orders. The problem started small. On the fourth day, his food rations disappeared from the storage unit. The officer in charge shrugged and said there must have been a mistake. Went hungry that night. On the fifth day, his training equipment malfunctioned during a climbing exercise. The safety rope snapped, and he fell 20 feet onto hard metal. He got up slowly, his shoulder burning with pain, and finished the exercise anyway. On the sixth day, someone filled his boots with a sticky liquid that smelled like dead animals. He cleaned them for an hour before training, saying nothing to anyone. The other recruits watched him with cold eyes. A few seemed impressed that he had not broken yet. Most just waited for the moment when he would finally give up. There was one person on the station who did not hate him. Her name was. She was a human intelligence officer, one of the few Earth people allowed on Vega 12. She worked in the communications center, translating alien languages and gathering information. She found in the mess hall on the seventh day, sitting alone at a table in the corner. "You look terrible," she said, sitting across from him. Almost smiled. "Thank you for noticing." Was small like him, with short dark hair and quick eyes that missed nothing. She pushed a food container toward him. "I brought you extra rations. I heard about your supply problems." News travels fast. On a station this size, everything is known within an hour. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. "There is a betting pool among the soldiers. They are wagering on how long until you quit." "What are the current odds?" "Most think you will last 3 more days. A few generous ones give you a week." Ate slowly, thinking about this. "And what do you think?" Studied his face for a long moment. "I think they do not know what humans are capable of. I think they see our size and assume we are weak. But I have read the files. I know what Earth is like. I know what our species has survived." She stood up to leave. "Prove them wrong for all of us." She walked away before he could respond. That afternoon, decided to make training personal. "Combat drills," he announced to the assembled recruits. "Hand to hand, the human will demonstrate." He pointed at the largest soldier in the group, a giant named who stood almost 9 feet tall, cracked his massive knuckles and grinned. "This is not fair," one of the smaller recruits muttered. It was a young, an insect-like alien with clicking mandibles. His name was, and he watched with something that might have been curiosity instead of hatred. "War is not fair," replied. "Begin." Charged, dodged left, but the alien was faster than his size suggested. A huge fist caught in the ribs and sent him flying. He hit the ground hard, gasping for air. Before he could stand, grabbed his leg and threw him across the training circle. The watching soldiers laughed. Got up. Hit him again and again and again. Each time went down. Each time he got back up. Blood ran from a cut above his eye. His left arm hung at a bad angle. His breathing was rough and painful. But he kept standing. "Stay down, little creature," called. "There is no shame in knowing your place." Wiped blood from his face with his good hand. "I have not found my place yet." The drill continued for another 10 minutes. By the end, could barely walk. Had to stop because even he was getting tired of hitting something that would not stay down. That night lay on his mat and felt every bruise, every cut, every broken thing inside his body. Humans healed fast compared to other species. By morning, some of the damage would already be better, but right now, everything hurt. He did not care. Pain was just information. Pain told you that you were still alive. The next morning, he was the first one at the training ground again. Stared at him like he was looking at a ghost. "You should be in the medical bay." "I am fine." "You are broken." Shrugged, and even that small movement sent fire through his shoulder. Broken things still work, they just work differently. Had no response. For the first time, something other than contempt flickered in his 4 eyes. It might have been confusion. It might have been the smallest seed of respect. At lunch, stood on a table in the mess hall and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Humans only join the alliance because they breed like insects and die like flies. They send us their disposable soldiers, hoping we will use them up and ask for more. That is all they are, disposable." The hall filled with laughter and agreement. Stood up slowly, the room went quiet. "On Earth," he said, his voice calm and clear, "we have an old saying, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down." He paused, looking around at all the alien faces watching him. "But sometimes the nail is made of stronger metal than the hammer." Jumped down from the table and walked toward until they stood face to face. Well, face to chest, given the size difference. "Are you threatening me, human?" "No, I am teaching you. Your people have traveled the stars for 10,000 years. My people have only been here for 3, but we learned something long ago that you have forgotten." "What is that?" Smiled, and there was nothing friendly in it. "The small and the quiet are often the most dangerous, because no one sees them coming." He turned and walked out of the mess hall, leaving silence behind him. That night came to his closet. The young looked nervous, his antennae twitching as he glanced down the hallway. "I wanted to ask you something," said quietly. "Is it true what they say about your planet, that your gravity crushes your bodies, that your weather kills millions, that every animal on Earth is trying to eat you?" Leaned against the doorframe. "All of that is true and more." His compound eyes widened. "Then how did your species survive?" Thought about his grandmother, about all the humans who had lived and died on that dangerous, beautiful world, about everything they had overcome just to reach the stars. "We survived," he said simply, "because we refused to die." Was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded slowly and walked away. Returned to his mat and picked up his grandmother's photograph. 7 days down," he whispered, "many more to go." Outside, the station continued its endless rotation through the cold void of space, and somewhere in its depths, the seeds of change had been planted. 3 weeks had passed since arrived on Vega 12. The laughter had become quieter. The sabotage had become less frequent. The soldiers still did not like him, but they had stopped expecting him to quit. He was like a stone in their boot that they could not remove. Today was certification day for heavy weapons. All recruits gathered in a massive hall at the center of the station. The room was filled with weapons of every size and type. Plasma rifles that could cut through starship armor, missile launchers that could destroy buildings, energy cannons that required 3 soldiers to operate. But everyone was looking at the weapon in the center of the room. It sat on a metal platform like a sleeping beast. The soldiers called it the Titan's Fist. It was a siege cannon designed by this people. The weapon was meant to punch holes through enemy fortifications. It could fire explosive rounds that would level a city block. And it weighed 340 kilograms. Commander stood beside the Titan's Fist and addressed the recruits. To pass certification, you must lift this weapon to your shoulder, hold it steady for 10 seconds, and complete the firing sequence. His black eyes swept across the room. This test separates soldiers from pretenders. One by one, the recruits stepped forward. They went first. They were strong, but their bodies were built for endurance, not raw power. Most of them used mechanical braces attached to their armor to help lift the weapon. Even then, several failed to hold it steady. They could not even try. Their insect bodies were designed for speed and precision, not strength. They were given alternative certifications with lighter weapons. Then came the walk to the platform with his chest pushed out. His 4 arms flexed as he gripped the Titan's Fist. With a grunt of effort, he lifted the massive weapon onto his shoulder. His arms shook. The glowing marks on his skin pulsed rapidly. Sweat appeared on his face. He held it for 15 seconds before completing the firing sequence and setting it down. The other cheered, turned to face the crowd, breathing hard but smiling. "That is how a real soldier handles a real weapon," he announced loudly. His eyes found in the back of the room. "Perhaps our human guest would like to try. We could use a good laugh." Laughter rippled through the hall. Commander raised one hand for silence, but something in his expression suggested he was curious too. "The human may attempt certification if he wishes," said. Felt every eye in the room turned toward him. He thought about the odds. The weapon weighed more than twice his own body weight. No human had ever tried to lift a Titan's Fist. There was no expectation that he could. But that was exactly why he had to try. He walked forward slowly. The crowd parted to let him through, their whispers following him like a cold wind. When he reached the platform, he looked up at the Titan's Fist and studied its shape, its balance, its grip points. "Today we will see the human break his bones," said to the soldier beside him. "Someone prepare the medical team." More laughter. Tuned them out. He focused on his breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow and steady. He thought about Earth, about the gravity that pressed down on every person, every animal, every blade of grass, about the muscles and bones that humans had developed over millions of years to survive that crushing weight. The aliens did not understand. Their home worlds had lighter gravity. I was born on a planet with only 40% of Earth's pull. They looked strong, but their strength was adapted to a gentler reality. Had lived his entire life, carrying a weight that these aliens had never felt. He gripped the Titan's Fist. The metal was cold and rough under his hands. He adjusted his stance, planting his feet wide, bending his knees. He remembered the endless training, the weighted suits he had worn since childhood, the hours of lifting and carrying and pushing and pulling. He had spent his whole life preparing for this moment, without even knowing it. Lifted. The weapon rose, slowly at first, then smoothly as he brought it up to his shoulder. His muscles burned, but it was a familiar burn, a good burn, the kind that told him he was alive and working. The hall went completely silent. Held the Titan's Fist on his shoulder. He did not shake, he did not sway. He stood as steady as a statue carved from stone. 10 seconds passed. 20 seconds. 30 seconds. Commander stared with his mouth slightly open. His 4 eyes were wide with disbelief, made a clicking sound that might have been shock or joy. 40 seconds. 50 seconds. 60 seconds. Could have held it longer, but he decided to show mercy. He shifted the weapon slightly and completed the firing sequence with smooth, practiced movements. The targeting system hummed. The safety locks disengaged. If it had been loaded, the weapon would have fired. Then he bent his knees and set the Titan's fist down gently on the platform. Not dropped, set down, as if it weighed nothing more than a bag of rice. He turned to face. "On Earth," said, his voice calm and even, "our gravity is 1.0 standard. Yours is 0.4. That means I grew up with 2.5 times the weight pressing on my body every single day of my life." He paused to let that sink in. "I have been training in weighted suits since I was 12 years old. By the time I was 16, I could carry my own body weight for 10 kilometers without stopping." Said nothing. His 4 arms hung at his sides. "You called me weak because I am small," continued. "You laughed at me because I look soft, but size means nothing without gravity, and softness means nothing without testing." He stepped closer to, "You have never been tested, not really. Everything in your life has been lighter than what I carry every morning just by getting out of bed." Still did not speak. Turned to Commander. "I believe I have passed certification, sir." Blinked slowly. Then he nodded. "You have exceeded certification requirements by a significant margin." He looked at the officers beside him. "Get this soldier proper quarters, and have someone update his file immediately. I want to know everything about Earth, everything about humans, everything about what we have clearly failed to understand." As walked out of the hall, the silence followed him. But it was a different silence now. Not the silence of contempt. The silence of shock. The silence of creatures who had just realized they were standing next to something dangerous. Caught up with him in the hallway. "That was impossible," the young said. "What you did in there should not be possible." Allowed himself a small smile. "Humans have a long history of doing impossible things. It is kind of our specialty." Behind them, Commander was already pulling up Earth's planetary files on his personal screen. His black eyes scanned the information with growing concern. Average gravity, 9.8 meters per second squared. Average temperature range, -40 to +50 degrees. Number of extinction level events survived, 5. Number of predator species, over 1 million. Primary survival strategy, adaptation and persistence. Classification, Category 5 Death World. Sat back in his chair and let out a long breath. For the first time in his military career, he wondered if his commanders had made a terrible mistake. Not by accepting humans into the alliance. By underestimating what they had invited in. Everything changed after the Titan's fist. Was moved from his storage closet to real quarters. Not the best room on the station, but a proper space with a bed, a window, and enough room to stretch his arms. When he walked through the hallways now, soldiers did not laugh. They stepped aside. They nodded. Some of them even greeted him by name. Avoided him completely. The big had not spoken a single word to since the certification test. Something had broken in him that day. Not his body, but his certainty. His belief that he understood how the universe worked. However, had become a constant companion. The young followed everywhere, asking endless questions about Earth. "Is it true that your oceans cover most of your planet?" asked one morning during breakfast. "About 70%. And your oceans contain creatures that could swallow a shuttle whole." "Yes, we call them whales. They are actually quite peaceful." Santini twitched in amazement. "On my world, water is precious. We fight wars over small lakes. I cannot imagine a planet covered in it." Thought about the oceans of Earth. The blue waves that stretched to the horizon, the storms that rose from the water and destroyed cities, the creatures that lived in the deep where light never reached. Water gives life, he said, but it can also take it away, like everything on Earth. A week after the certification test, a new ship arrived at Vega 12. It carried important visitors, according to the rumors, officers from Alliance High Command, scientists, and one person who made the entire station nervous. Captain Doha first heard the name from, who found him in the training ground during his morning exercises. "Have you heard?" she asked, her voice low and excited. "Doha is here, the Doha." "Should I know that name?" Stared at him like he had asked what air was. Captain Doha is a legend. She was one of the first humans to join the Alliance military 15 years ago. She has more combat experience than any human alive. Some say she has killed more enemies than entire battalions. "And she is here, why?" "To evaluate you," grabbed his arm. "This is not a joke. If Doha thinks you are worthy, doors will open. If she thinks you are not." She did not finish the sentence. Met Captain Doha that afternoon in Commander's office. She was a small woman, even shorter than, with gray hair cut close to her skull and eyes that seemed to look through walls. She sat perfectly still in her chair, watching him enter with an expression that revealed nothing. "Private," she said. Her voice was cold and flat like metal. "I have read your file. I have watched the recordings of your certification test. I have spoken with Commander about your performance." Stood at attention. "Yes, Captain. The Alliance thinks humans are useful because we breed quickly and die easily. They want to use us as disposable soldiers, meat for the grinder." Doha stood and walked around him in a slow circle. "But that is not why humans were really recruited. Do you know the truth?" "No, Captain." Alliance analysts discovered something when they studied Earth, something that worried them very much. She stopped in front of him and looked up into his eyes. "Species have unique advantages in combat. They heal faster, they adapt faster, they survive conditions that would kill softer creatures. And most importantly, they do not stop fighting, ever, for any reason." Remembered the countless times he had gotten back up during training, the wounds that closed overnight, the exhaustion that faded after a few hours of sleep. "The Alliance needs soldiers who can fight in places their regular troops cannot survive," Doha continued. "Toxic atmospheres, extreme temperatures, high radiation, crushing gravity." She smiled, and there was something dangerous in it. "Humans can survive all of it. We are walking nightmares, Private. And the Alliance is just beginning to understand what they have let in." Before could respond, alarms began screaming. Red lights flashed. The floor shook. A voice came over the station speakers, speaking in the universal military language that all Alliance soldiers understood. "Alert! Alert! Station breach detected. Hostile forces in sections 7 through 12. All combat personnel report to defensive positions." Doha's cold expression did not change. "It seems we will have a practical examination sooner than expected." She pulled a pistol from her belt and checked its charge. "Raiders, probably pirates looking for weapons and supplies. They attack stations like this every few months." "What do we do?" "We fight." Doha headed for the door. "Stay alive, Private. I did not come all this way to watch you die." The station was chaos. Power had failed in half the sections, leaving only emergency lights that cast everything in dim red shadows. Soldiers ran through the hallways, shouting orders and forming defensive lines. The sounds of gunfire echoed from somewhere nearby. Found his near Section 9. Was there, along with 4 other soldiers he had trained with over the past weeks. They looked scared. Even the big soldier at the back was trembling. "What do we do?" asked. His mandibles clicked rapidly with fear. "We cannot see anything. Our equipment is not working. I do not know where the enemy is." Took a deep breath. The darkness did not bother him. Humans had evolved to hunt in darkness. Their ears could hear tiny sounds. Their noses could smell changes in the air. Their skin could feel vibrations through the floor. "Follow me," he said. "Stay quiet, trust your other senses." He led them through the dark station, listening for sounds of movement, smelling for the strange chemical scent of raiders. 3 times he stopped the group and pressed them against the wall just before enemy soldiers walked past. "How do you know?" whispered. "I can hear them breathing. I can smell their weapons." They reached a corridor where wounded soldiers lay scattered across the floor. Some were. All of them had been ambushed in the darkness. Among them was. The big was slumped against the wall, 2 of his 4 arms hanging at wrong angles. Blue blood leaked from a wound in his side. His eyes were closed. "Leave him," one of the soldiers said. "He is probably dead anyway." Walked to and checked his pulse, still alive, barely. "Help me lift him," said. "He hates you. He spent weeks trying to make you quit." "He is my squad. That is all that matters." They argued for a moment, but was already picking up the Titan's fist that lay beside his body. The heavy weapon felt familiar in his hands now. He lifted it onto his shoulder, then knelt down and pulled onto his back with his free arm. 340 kilograms of weapon, 150 kilograms of wounded, stood up slowly, carrying both. The other soldiers stared. "Move," said. "We need to reach the defensive line." They moved. For the next 2 hours, fought through the station with his impossible burden. When raiders appeared, he sat down carefully and used the Titan's fist to destroy them. When the path was clear, he picked up again and kept moving. At one point, they reached a corridor completely blocked by enemy soldiers. At least 20 raiders had set up a position there, cutting off access to the main defensive line. "We cannot get through," said. "There are too many." Looked at the corridor. It was narrow. The raiders had no room to spread out. "Get everyone to cover," he said. "I will handle this." He walked into the corridor alone, carrying only the Titan's fist. The raiders saw him and started shooting. Plasma bolts screamed past his face, burning the air. One caught his arm and left a smoking wound. Another grazed his leg. Did not stop. He did not slow down. He walked forward like death itself, unstoppable and patient. The raiders began to panic. They had never seen anything like this. A small creature walking through their fire, ignoring wounds that should have dropped him, coming closer and closer. Raised the Titan's fist and fired. The explosion was beautiful in a terrible way. When the smoke cleared, the corridor was empty. 7 minutes later, reached the defensive line. He handed to the medical team and finally allowed himself to lean against the wall. Captain Doha was waiting for him. 7 minutes, she said. "You held that corridor alone for 7 minutes, with a weapon meant for siege warfare, while carrying a wounded soldier." "Yes, Captain." Doha nodded slowly. Something that might have been approval flickered in her cold eyes. "You will do nicely, Private. You will do very nicely indeed." In the medical bay later that night, woke up. He looked around in confusion until his eyes found sitting in a chair beside his bed. "You said," his voice was weak and rough. "You saved me, why?" Shrugged, then winced as the movement pulled at his bandaged wounds. "You are my squad. That is all that matters." Was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached out with one of his unbroken arms and gripped his hand. "Thank you," he said simply. It was the first kind word he had ever spoken to the human. It would not be the last. 1 month had passed since the raider attack. Vega 12 had been repaired. The dead had been mourned. Life on the station had returned to normal, but something was different now. Something had shifted in the way people looked at the human among them. Stood in the great hall where new soldiers received their ranks. The same room where he had once stood at the back, ignored and mocked. Now he stood at the front, wearing a new uniform with symbols that meant something. Commander stood before the assembled soldiers, his face unreadable as always. But those who knew him well could see something in his small black eyes, something that might have been respect. "Today we recognize soldiers who have proven themselves in combat," announced. "Soldiers who showed courage when others showed fear. Soldiers who protected their brothers and sisters when it would have been easier to run." He turned to look at Private of Earth. Step forward. Walked to the center of the hall. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. The crowd was silent, but it was a different silence than before. Not the silence of contempt, the silence of attention. During the raid or attack, this soldier held a critical corridor for 7 minutes against overwhelming enemy forces. He carried a wounded comrade while bearing the weight of our heaviest weapon. He led his through darkness when others could not see. He showed the qualities we value most in our warriors. Paused, and for a moment his stone face softened just slightly. "I was wrong about humans. I believed the reports that called your species weak and primitive. I looked at your size and assumed you had nothing to offer. I was a fool." He reached out and pinned a new rank insignia onto his uniform. "From this day forward, you are leader, the first human to hold this rank in the history of the Galactic Alliance ground forces." Applause filled the hall. Not polite applause, real applause, the sound of soldiers who had seen what could do and understood what it meant. After the ceremony, Captain Doha found near the viewing window. Outside, stars stretched across the endless black of space. Somewhere out there, Earth continued its ancient dance around the sun, unaware that its children had begun to change the galaxy. "You did well," Doha said. "Thank you, Captain." "Do not thank me yet." She handed him a data pad. "Alliance Command has made some decisions based on your performance. They are sending more humans to join the military program. Many more." Looked at the numbers on the screen. His eyes widened. 300 volunteers in the first wave, with more coming every month. Doha allowed herself a small smile. "They want you to help train them, to prepare them for what they will face out here." "Me, I have only been here 2 months." "You are the only human who has proven what we can do. The others will need someone to show them, someone who understands both worlds." She turned to look at him directly. "This is important, not just for those soldiers, for all of humanity. The way aliens see us is changing because of what you did, but it has to keep changing. It has to become permanent." Thought about the first day he had arrived on Vega 12. The laughter, the storage closet, the endless tests and humiliations, all of it had led to this moment. "I will do it," he said. "I know you will." Doha walked away, leaving him alone with the stars. A few minutes later appeared. She had a strange look on her face. "Have you seen the new intelligence report?" she asked. "Which one?" "The one about humans." She pulled up a file on her personal screen. "Alliance Command has created a new species classification for us. They updated it after the raider attack." Looked at the screen. Under the section labeled Threat Assessment, he saw the words that made him laugh out loud. Species classification, Homo human. Origin, Earth, Category 5 Death World. Threat rating, Persistent Threat Species. Notes: do not underestimate. Do not engage in extended conflict. Do not attempt to outlast. Subject species shows extreme adaptability, unusual physical endurance, and psychological resilience far beyond initial projections. Recommend caution in all interactions. Persistent threat species, repeated with a grin. "I think we should put that on a t-shirt." Smiled. "I prefer the term my grandmother used." What was that? Survivors. The next morning, a new transport ship arrived at Vega 12. Its cargo doors opened, and a crowd of young alien recruits poured out onto the docking bay. They were a mix of species, tall, four-armed, clicking, and others did not recognize. All of them fresh from their home worlds, all of them eager to prove themselves. They gathered in the orientation hall, whispering to each other and looking around with curious eyes. When walked in, some of them noticed his small size and began to snicker. "Look at that," one recruit said loudly. "They let a pet walk around without a leash." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Stood beside, his mandibles clicking with amusement. He was now officially second in command, a position he had earned through loyalty and courage during the raider attack. He leaned close and whispered, "Should we tell them?" Looked at the laughing recruits. He remembered being in their position. He remembered how certain they all were that they understood the universe, how wrong they had been. He walked to the center of the room and picked up something that had been left there waiting. The Titan's fist. 340 kilograms of military technology that most of these recruits would struggle to lift even with mechanical assistance. Put it on his shoulder like it was made of paper. The laughter stopped. "My name is Leader," he said, his voice calm and clear. "I am human. I come from a planet called Earth, which your military classifies as a Category 5 death world. For the next 6 months, I will be responsible for turning you from recruits into soldiers." He looked at the who had called him a pet. The alien's 4 eyes were very wide. "Some of you think you know what strength is. You are wrong." Began walking slowly through the crowd, still carrying the massive weapon as easily as a walking stick. "Strength is not about size. Strength is not about how much you can lift on your home world with your comfortable gravity and your gentle weather. Strength is about what you do when everything is against you, when you have been knocked down so many times that your body screams at you to quit. When the darkness is complete and the enemy is everywhere and no one is coming to help." He stopped in front of the young and looked up into his face. "Strength is getting up anyway, every single time, until your enemies are the ones who quit." The swallowed hard but said nothing. Walked back to the center of the room and set the Titan's fist down gently. "You have been taught that humans are weak, that we are small and soft and fragile, that we die easily and break easily and give up easily." He smiled, and there was a weight of experience in that smile that made the recruits nervous. "You were taught wrong." He gestured to who stepped forward with a data pad. "Your training begins now. I suggest you pay attention." Turned toward the door, then paused and looked back over his shoulder. "And the next time you think about calling a human weak, remember this. My species survived ice ages, volcanic winters, mass extinctions, and each other. We are still here. Many of the things that tried to kill us are not." He walked out, leaving silence behind him. In his quarters that night, held his grandmother's photograph one last time before placing it in a small frame on his new shelf. The storage closet seemed like a lifetime ago. "I made it," he whispered. "Not just for me, for all of us. Humans are not disposable anymore. We are not jokes or pets or meat for the grinder. We are soldiers. We are survivors." He looked out his window at the stars. Somewhere out there, hundreds of human volunteers were preparing to join him. Soon there would be thousands, then millions. Earth's children were spreading across the galaxy, carrying with them the same stubborn will to survive that had brought their species through every disaster their dangerous world could throw at them. The aliens had wanted disposable soldiers. They had gotten something else entirely. They had gotten humanity. And the galaxy would never be the same. Outside, the station continued its endless rotation through the cold void of space. Stars burned in the distance, ancient and indifferent. But on one small station, something new had been born, something that would grow and spread and change everything it touched. The nail that refused to be hammered down had found its place at last. And it was made of stronger metal than anyone had imagined.